Hey everybody, on this particular episode itself, we're going to be speaking about coaching beyond the cognitive self.
I think this is a very important topic because
Every topic is important, but tell me about it. What do you find important?
It's important because we are talking about professional and mastery level of coaching,
Right.
And when it comes to starting out as a coach at the associate level, you are just required to talk through the flow of coaching in a structured manner.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of paying attention to what the client is cognitively saying, right? But the thing is that where the magic lies? No, because it's pretty obvious in terms of it doesn't bring that deep an awareness to the client, given that, a lot of things can be seen or thought about. But instead, we want to lean into what is less seen that actually also exists within a person, that if we can tap into that, it brings a lot more out into the session to
Right.
work on.
Could you elaborate a little bit more? I thought you were touching on a very interesting point and perspective the way that you just presented.
I think personally, I just feel that the human is, should I say, a black box. There's only so much we know of the human, right? And we are operating based off what we know of the human to.
Are you talking about the
coach them.
iceberg theory? Let's
Yes.
start with the iceberg theory, since most coaches will have already come across this thing, right?
Yes.
And they will call this the consciousness,
Mhm.
which is 1%. And then there's this 99%.
There's unconscious.
And then, of course, this line is what they call the subconscious, right?
Yes.
The edge between the conscious and unconscious.
Correct.
So, in the conscious 1%, I know what I know. I know what I don't know. And 99%, they will always attribute I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
And then they try to use that to justify why they did certain things, and then it's as though they never did it. Kind of we call it a spiritual bypass, right? But it's a psychological bypass.
Yep.
And of course, in the realm of the unconscious, what do they say? What do they really say? They say that there exists so much potential that you ever have. And the whole point of this framework is to tell you to work on your stuff, to unlock really what's underneath it.
Yes.
Beautiful framework, that really was beautifully constructed in the 1960s. But we're in the world of 2025, so I think we need something more sophisticated. I think we need to go past beyond just talking about conscious, unconscious, and subconscious. And I want to introduce you, in the previous episode, we talked about this thing called the primary processes. And then we are also talking about this thing called the secondary processes. Of course, when we talk about the deep unconscious itself, we are also looking into many different aspects of ourselves that we do not know, or we think we know, but then we don't. We assume that we do understand ourselves, but what we understand about ourselves is oftentimes a fragment. That's why it's 1%. And I don't understand why they have to really say 1%, because the truth is probably 0.001. But for the better illustration, 199, to make a point.
Yep.
But I think this model is really outdated, because, if we really look into what do you not know that you don't know, and usually they will say this is your barriers, these are the gaps that you face, these are the obstacles, challenges, things that you keep attracting in your life. Okay, so how can we say that that's unconscious when I literally just say that there's a barrier, there's a gap, there's an obstacle, there's a challenge, there's a attracting factor? So in other words, I'm saying that maybe this model, we should stop using it in any seminars. And really understanding what is really the unconscious, what Kwang was really talking about and Sigmund Freud was talking about back in the 1950s when they were talking about the collective unconsciousness. I think what we're really interested in is really what we talk about, the primary processes and secondary. Just now earlier on in the previous episode, we talked that primary processes are things that we identify with. Whereas secondary processes are the things that we marginalize or dissociate. So to bring it back to coaching earlier on, we're talking about at the MCC level, we need to coach a client not just in terms of what they say, but what they don't say, the unsaid, the dreams, the essence. Right, and of course there's this thing called consensus reality, what is acceptable. And most people when they're talking in consensus reality. And that's the atypical ACC kind of coaching itself. But when we talk about dreams, what are dreams? Dreams have forms. We can visualize the forms. But then there's this whole thing called polarity around it. We still feel very polarized by it because there's so much edges to work around it. Right? That's why they say that your childhood dream contains your medicine and also the key coding of your entire lifetime. So if we understand dreams, not just in the way that we perceive dreams in a consensus reality way, which most people say, okay, I have a dream. My dream is to be so and so, is to do so and so. I like to bring it to a next step to ask, what is that dream really about? And every figures in the dream in the hologram itself give us an indicator and understanding of what is really happening, not just in present time, but the entire person's lifetime. Does it make sense? And then, of course, essence, just now earlier we talked essence about oneness. Oneness of the universe, right? The whole. So we're talking about very holistic, integrative work. Any questions you want to ask me? So maybe you can help me elaborate.
Yeah,
or ask me questions.
Yeah, I think it's more of like, so what does it entail, this whole idea of oneness or wholeness? What are those aspects that we are not actually tapping into that we could be more into and bring into?
Right, and I think the first step we have to realize is that we are not whole. We have holes in our life. And this holes in our life was created by our childhood trauma. Okay, and we talked about trauma is either there's a excess, force, or there's an absence where we expect things to happen. So it creates holes in our life. What does holes do? It leaks out energy. Right? So we're not really whole. So part of why we're doing healing work itself is to make sure that we become whole again. This word whole, W-H-O-L-E,
right,
rather than H-O-L-E. So, yeah. So, in a way, why do people look for soulmates? Because in the consensus reality, there is certain understanding saying that, you must look for somebody to feed you, to fill you up. Okay, if you're a man, you should be looking for a woman. If you're a man, you could look for a man. If you're a woman, you could look for a woman, vice versa. But then what we don't realize is that oftentimes, the person that we end up marrying, they are also our most difficult parents. And again, that's tied back to childhood trauma and history, personal history and content. So I think having some of this background understanding in psychology, in process work, in body work, in breath work, in symptoms work, in relationship works, in conflict resolution work, and facilitation, it gives you a broader understanding of what a person is really going through. So when you coach them, you're not just coaching them in a limited perspective, but you have really a lot of field to play with. And of course, in coaching, you can only coach them based on what they're telling you. But then once you understand the dreaming, you also get a holographic map of exactly where they're really at. So what you perceive as a point A versus somebody else who have these disciplines and then looking at the point A is a two different point A.
Yep.
And if we can identify and map out the precision of where a person is at, naturally whatever solution that comes, whatever action step that's required for follow through, it naturally will occur. And it occurs in the path of least resistance, just like how the river flows from one end to another end. A river flows from high point to a low point. Does it make sense? It always follows the path of least resistance. So it's the same as dreaming, isn't it? If we allow ourselves not to be bounded and binded by this whole consensus reality, but we allow ourselves to just dream into our dreams, and I want to say that they are married to daydreaming. A lot of times we're marginalizing it. our school teachers, the system that we come up from, what do they tell you? Why are you daydreaming? As
you're
though
not
something is
focused.
wrong.
Yeah.
So our entire lifetime, we keep trying to be present. We keep trying to stay awake when really our body is shutting off. What if we take a moment and just follow the shut off? What if we take a moment and just follow the dreaming? Where does it bring us to? What if we follow it just like how we are following the river and we're tracking it? Now, I think that will help people to improve their skill set of tracking in a coaching conversation what the client is really saying versus using whatever they are saying at the last bit or what you feel is significant important because of certain energetic charge, but it could have already passed on in the moment since every moment is different. So I think this will give a bigger range and breadth in terms of how we approach coaching and facilitation. What do you think?
True. I mean, as you're talking about it, I'm like, yeah. For coaches who tend to use the last sentence of what the client said to construct your coaching questions, that's a very lazy way of coaching.
Not just lazy way, it shows that you're not really paying attention, you're not present. And I get that at first, if your entire life you were not trained, it is challenging. So what we really offer in our training in the Coaching Accelerator program itself is to really train people to really track things. And the best way to learn how to track things is to track the things within you.
Yep.
And that's what awareness work is really about. It's pure tracking.
Yes. So I think before we go deeper into that, maybe let's talk about the whole idea of using cognitive thinking to coach, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the issue with that? Because, for a lot of people, when after they go through coaching, they're in a state of where they know, but then somehow they're not realizing or somehow they can't take the action to change. Right? So at some point, there are limits to just using thinking.
Right. So you sign them up for another coaching session. And then, this is how you build a coaching business because let's be real about it. If you expect yourself to solve all their problems in an hour coaching session, and I think this might be an overestimation of your ability because even if it's the best people in the world, we know that a person is built up based on complexity itself. It's not something that can easily be resolved in an hour. Sure, we can get things moved, but to say that their entire life problems disappear in an hour, I think we got to re-examine that belief system that we have.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So to bring back what you just shared with me, can you repeat the question again?
So it is the risk of staying purely cognitive in coaching.
First and foremost, what does cognitive even mean?
Cognitive means there's a lot of use of thinking.
Right.
As a way, or like listening to what's obvious, what's being spoken,
Right.
and then taking as is to coach. When
Right.
the person is so much more.
Right. So first thing first, always watch for the feedback and signals because it really reflects what is happening in their secondary process. What they're not saying, what are the unsaid. Why are that important? Because it gives us a clue to what they are really feeling. The mind says something, but the feeling feels something else.
Yep.
And maybe that's why when it comes to the action part, there's a misalignment. I think we're too quick to jump into doing, to do the next action, without really properly diagnose the real issue. And of course, we have to be in a very clean state to even catch that.
Yep.
Because if you go into a coaching session with your existing problems, you're just amplifying your own problems.
Yeah. But I think at the same time, when you're talking about how we move into doing very quickly, I think that is very true for coaches who are still new to coaching, right? There's always this thing around like, let's get the client to action. What can they do? But if they know what they need to do, they wouldn't be here. Obviously, there's something that's stopping them from doing it, and the constant focus on the action plan and the doing doesn't work. That should be where your coaching go towards the end of the coaching session or the process. And instead, the most part of the session goes into, like really deep diving with them. Where really is the issue? What are the cues that are coming up that could really support that movement forward? So that is where the doing doesn't become the main thing. But then yet, if we stop focusing on doing, then where do we focus instead? So Ming earlier on was sharing a lot around like how do you look at what's not said. But at the same time, there's so much to a person. They have their emotions, the body. Sometimes when a client speaks or talks, they speak in metaphors. They might have certain images. Or even like in the case that you are speaking of, that a person can also have their dreams that they want to share about, and it's how you make sense of that. Right? So there's so much range that we can explore, and how can we then begin to do that?
I think first and foremost, a certain level of training around the channels must happen first to help to recap the audience. There's movement, which is more physical. There's feelings. Again, that's more emotional in the present time. There is abstract ideas. Right? That's more mental. And then there is the sensory. Say sight, sounds, taste, smell, feeling. Right, that's perceptive. There is the relationship channel, where you notice how come in their conversation they keep talking about a relationship. So they're very open in relationship channel. Then there's a world channel where they talk about they want to change the world, things that are more worldly per se. And of course, sometimes a spiritual channel will come out. So these are a good indicator to look into it. And of course, there's external, more externalized, and then there's more internal as well. Just because a person is not really saying so much in the present time doesn't mean that nothing is happening around them. In fact, a lot of things are happening around them. And that's why, so I think we jump into identifying what is happening in the person without really knowing what's really happening in the person. We don't try to seek to understand. If a person suddenly go quiet, we think that, hey, they are stuck. But then they could not be stuck. They might be in an internal process by themselves. So I like how coaching process, work, and facilitation can come in hand swiftly, because it doesn't negate one or another. You're not working through present time issue, but you're finding a new way of following the Tao to guide a person, to find their own path of this resistance. And over time, it becomes a habit, a new interrupt of familiar patterns. It can be a new way of living and new way of operating. Does it make sense? Whatever I'm sharing.
Yes, it makes sense. I mean, suddenly there's a lot
that they come up with. It is a lot to work with, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about coaching itself, are you paying attention to what they're saying? Are you paying attention to what they give primary signal or double signal? What are the channels, primary channel, when they describe their processes, or what they are feeling in the moment itself? Are they talking more of feelings? Are they talking about more movement? Are they talking about abstract ideas? Are they talking about the sensories? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? Okay, what are they smelling? What are they tasting? What are they feeling itself? What about the proprioceptive? What about their relationship? If a person keeps talking about relationship, an old relationship, and then you might be, I thought we were coaching at something. Why are they bring up about their relationship with their mom? So maybe there is a connection down there, and our role as a coach is to really stay neutral at the zero zone to help them really connect the dots. If we come in there with certain polarity, whether it's a positive charge or negative charge, we're already biased at some level. And then of course there's this whole thing around world channel. If they start talking about, I want to change the world, blah blah blah, you know that their world channel is very connected. If somebody talks a lot about spiritual, so you know that their spiritual connection is that. I think too often, when the client doesn't give us the feedback that we're familiar with, we jump into conclusion that they're not following us. Their job is not to follow us. Our role is to guide them, to track them, to coach them. If we expect our client to be of a certain way, then maybe we need to work on ourselves and look into where in our life are we like that.
Exactly. I mean, even the whole idea of just now you're talking about paying attention, right? Then the question to ask yourself as a coach is, what are you really paying attention to?
Right.
When you're in a coaching session? Are you just paying attention to what the person is saying, the content of it, all that data? Or are you paying attention to other aspects of them? Because, interestingly, sometimes without trying much or trying hard at all, the client gives us a lot of clues. They leave clues lying everywhere.
That's right.
It's leaking out of them because they can't contain it. It's something that needs to come out. But it's a question of whether you are seeing what those things are.
Sometimes clients doesn't even know that they're talking about it.
Yes.
Just as, how do you tell somebody something without telling them something? Right? So we're going to watch for the non-verbal cues. Right?
Yes, correct. And I think one of the key things that tends to get sidelined in a coaching session is the idea of emotions. Right? there are a number of coaches out there who feel that, it's very challenging to dive into the emotions of the person. There's this fear of having to handle somebody else's emotions.
Or it's really because they haven't done their work on themselves. They don't know how to deal with their own feelings and emotions because of their past history itself. So that really suggests that there's more work for the coaches to do. And of course, if they think that they're really above it, then maybe they have to re-examine their own ego of how it is really getting into the way of helping the people if their intention was to help people. Some people, we do know that, they became a coach not because they want to help people, but it's for something that looks better on their CV. There's nothing wrong or right about it, but then we really want to examine why we do what we do, because that tells you whether you have it in you to hang in there when things get challenging, when you deal with complicated clients, when you deal with complicated challenges, issues. Is how do you handle it? Because that comes out in your way of coaching. It also comes out in the way of your being. So naturally, it really sets certain tonality up in the whole coaching session, whether somebody will trust you, what kind of rhythm will we be operating on. And usually these are the non-verbal cues that people pick up before they really choose a coach. Sometimes people choose a coach because of resonance, and resonance might not be necessarily a good thing. Of course, we are looking for resonance, but most of us, we are really gravitate to people who are resonating with us. And sometimes what we need is something that doesn't resonate so that we can explore a higher territory that we have not explored. Resonance, what is resonance? Frequency. What constitutes frequency? A level of trauma that a person have. If let's say person A have the same trauma as person B, that their mother marginalized them as they were a child, saying that they are not good enough, then they end up being able to relate to each other better because of trauma. But even before they start talking about this trauma itself, they're already feeling into each other's feel. So that's how powerful our EMF wave is. And if we don't change our feel, we will keep attracting the same kind of circumstances over and over again, the same kind of patterns over and over again, the same kind of relationships. It's like being stuck in the samsara. So question comes, how do we get out of this whole thing? How do we get out of our own suffering? If we are the cause of our suffering, therefore we are also the people who can get ourselves out of the suffering. Of course, with the right means and techniques. Now, why is it related with coaching in this context? Because we are always dreaming about it. Our deepest essence, why are we dreaming about something? It's because we are so disconnected from it. So what do we need to do to heal that connection? How do we become closer to our dreaming, such that there's a unification process between us, my consciousness reality, my dreaming, and my essence itself? And that's part of the inner work itself that we need to do. And this deep work that we do naturally will translate in the way of how we approach coaching. What kind of methodologies we use? How do you deal with a hot spot? How do we deal with a cold spot? Right, instead of, freaking out. It's natural to freak out, if you're dealing with something first time, and then you don't have a bandwidth or dictionary for that. But that's why you need to clock so many hours, because you're building your vocabulary, you're building your repertoire.
So for the benefit of the listeners, right, the students, what would you say is a hotspot that you had dealt with before?
Many. Which one?
Just pick one.
Pick one. Oh. A hotspot could look like this, in the middle of a coaching session, a person start bringing up their historical patterns, with their father, and start projecting that onto you. Say, the father was a caregiver, wasn't really quite a caregiver to the family itself, was never really quite there, was kind of an absent figure, but yet and also a tyrant figure in their life, and they start projecting that onto a coach or a teacher or somebody with authority, power itself, or rank. And it becomes very interesting because while we are working on the case itself, this suddenly comes out of nowhere. The space suddenly feels heated up, fiery. It feels like everything is burning down. And most people at this point will freak out. And people, if somebody who is not trained, who haven't healed their own personal shit, what would they do? They'll walk away. They'll say, this is not working out, I'll walk away. But that's an edge. That's exactly what you've been doing your entire life. That's why you can't deal with cases like this. My recommendation is you persist on, you keep dealing with it, you hold the client to the edge, you bring awareness. You become strong enough to hold that space, to really resolve that conflict itself, to bring it to the awareness of the projection itself. Sometimes the therapist, the facilitator, or the coach itself is the one dreaming another person up. Sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes it's both ways. But there must be something.
What does it mean to dream somebody up?
Right. So, for example, if you had a bad experience because your dad itself, for every authority figure that you come across, you start dreaming them up as your father, as a projection of your father, then this becomes a very problematic case because the person is not your father. Second and foremost, you are expecting the other person to behave like your father, so it becomes a setup. You are dreaming them up into somebody that they are not, so that they can perform in a specific way that your father used to do in your childhood history. People tend to do that in relationship and they have no idea. So when I bring this up to my students in class, it always sounds so revolutionary to them. But we're constantly doing that. That's why there's dysfunctionality in our relationship. That's why there's inefficiencies. That's why there's gap. That's why things cannot happen. Things cannot get done.
And I think what you are talking about doesn't just happen like, in a romantic or family relationship. It also happens at work, right? Because I recall, back when I was still in corporate, I had a boss and his wife would always persecute him somehow.
Right.
Right. And working with him, there was a moment in time where I felt like really enraged and I felt like scolding him the way that his wife would. And that was when I realized that, hey, I think maybe he's dreaming me up to be somebody that I'm not. Or like vice versa, in my world, then I would dream him up to be a useless person.
Right.
Because that's something that, I had to work through as part of my own personal development journey because of how I saw my parents growing up. That viewpoint that I had that made it hard to work with, and it became something that keeps coming up in my workplace and in other aspects of life.
So how were you able to catch yourself? When did you start realizing that you were dreaming them up? Or it was each other dreaming each other up to be their dream figures in your life?
In terms of how I was being dreamt up, I realized it when I was wondering how come I felt so enraged and it didn't feel normal. Or like when I see him as a boss, actually he's quite capable of doing a lot of things. It's just that yes, he has his weaknesses, but why am I so quick to judge that he's useless?
Right.
As an example. So the degree of awareness it takes to be clear of whether you are dreaming somebody up or whether this is happening in the now time, I think it takes a lot of discernment.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you work through that subsequently?
Interestingly, with my boss being useless, I had to go experience some process work and to realize that, hey, actually maybe he is moving. It's just that in my world, I think he's not moving. So I didn't have that objectivity because in my world, I had a certain set of expectations on, as a boss, how you should be, what you should achieve, and how you should, show up as a boss.
Right.
But then, because it didn't happen that way, or it just moved really slowly, so in my world, things are not moving at all. And so I kind of placed a judgment on him.
Right.
And it took going through a process work to identify that, hey, maybe he's moving, it's just at a very micro level that I'm not able to identify.
Right. Or he's moving in the orientation and direction that you're not familiar or you don't recognize because there's some biasness down there.
Yes, correct. So it's the lack of openness to see more than what my set of lenses can see that makes me create that judgment of him.
Right.
That didn't help the working relationship.
Right. So how do you think that our students can be even more mindful about the lens that they carry and wear as they look into the world?
I feel like first and foremost, you got to look at where are aspects in your life you feel are not working out for you. And where they are not working out, is it really the other person who's at fault or they are causing this? Because it's so easy to externalize it.
Right. How are you contributing to the trouble too that you're facing? How are you contributing to things that are bugging you? I always felt that, the things that bug you can always give you very deep insight about who you are and what you are and what you're really feeling annoyed by. if we don't resist the bugging, we just follow the bugging. So why does it upset me? Oh, it upsets me because it reminds me of every moment my boundary is crossed. Every time I ask my mom not to do this, and she keep on having her way, and she think that that's a way of love. Whereas in my world, as a child, so that was a way of violating my boundary. So growing up itself, I become very careful about my space, who I let in, who I don't let in. But here comes a different problem, isn't it? What happens when somebody crossed my boundary? I started becoming this whole monster that I was, because back when I was a child, I couldn't express that. So that becomes the whole dream figure of the dragon, humanoid, trying to tear people apart for crossing the boundary, because the whole dragon archetype itself is always about protecting the treasures. So process what happens in the moment. Even right now as I'm talking, so I'm actually feeling into what's happening in the field, and I'm just naming it. The more conscious we are of our primary processes as secondary processes, the more we can choose not to partake in the dramas that people offer us. Since everybody is on the stage, they are just dreaming us into a certain script itself. So why do we participate? And maybe not having the wisdom and insight and awareness not to participate is the way to get out of the wheel.
But then that is going to take a lot of self-awareness work.
But that's exactly what the role of a coach is, isn't it? Because the role of a coach is not the leader, the number one leader. The role of a coach is also not a supporter as well, or a passenger backseat as a number 3. But the coach role is more of a number 0. You're here, but you're not here. You're like a tree. You know what I'm saying? You're like a tree. You carry the essence and the embodiment of a tree yourself. You're just there. So I feel that this whole dream figures in the way that we just described, it can potentially change the way that people relate coaching. It's not about doing more. If you feel the need to do more, take a moment, pause for a moment, ask yourself this: where in your life have you not done enough? Where in your life are you feeling that you're not doing enough or doing more? What was the more that you didn't do that created a lack and a depth that you feel, such that you have to compensate it in every context of your life, even though you never needed to? I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by how people act, people behave, people conduct, because every little thing tells you, give you an opening to understanding how they live their life, where they come from, who are they, what do they really do, and where do they go next in their life. So I think we tend to marginalize all these things, and we justify it as not important, right? Or we say that, oh, how is it related with coaching? So we just stop participating fully. If we are here, we're here. We don't have to try to be here. But can I be here while I follow the dream? The answer is yes. Because it's a whole training of the altered state of consciousness, being able to move at a certain state and moving and moving and moving like a wave. So a lot of the conflicts and wars that we see in our world today, this is polarizing. Because they are really consensus reality in a dreaming. We're dreaming up wars. That's why it happens at a global effect. So the first war we have to deal with is the internal war that we're at war with ourselves. And to really resolve that and heal that, so that we can live in a more harmonious way. And maybe if you live in a harmonious way, you start attracting people who are harmonious, because it's in the field.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, it just reminded me of our experience at the airport.
Right.
The entire violence that we witnessed.
Could you share a little bit more about that?
So it was the day that we were leaving Singapore to come to Thailand.
Yeah,
for
and
a
we
retreat.
saw a man and then harassing another person.
Yes, like I think her daughter was, taking 4 seats, and she was asked to shift, and she shifted obligingly.
Yeah.
But then subsequently, whoever was seated there, the parents came along. The father didn't seem happy about it. He did not voice out, but instead it manifested into a certain violence where he was somehow trying to swing his cabin luggage at the person who was taking a couple of the seats there. And I thought that was quite jarring to the senses to see that, why can't you just talk it out? Why do you need to take such action where it's taken by CCTV?
That's right. And there wasn't any violence in the first place. Why do people respond so hostility, towards something, really because of all this repression and suppression. For example, the dad wasn't able to be there for the daughter, to speak up for the daughter itself, and he tried to match up that role in a very wrong timing way. So it come off in a very wrong way. But he didn't just wanted to do that, he was trying to get even. So that becomes a very unhealthy loop, because you're picking a fight, you're creating more violence. Now, if you're the one being triggered, what do? Do you respond? Do you react? Most people will react back. Most people will confront him. No, maybe the best way is to walk away. And walking away is always an option.
Yes, because by engaging is falling into the setup that they have.
That's right. They want to engage you to partake in their conflict. And you have the choice and awareness to say, no, that's your shit. I better do my shit.
Yes.
I better resolve my shit.
Yeah, so it really takes a lot of self-awareness and discernment to be able to see what the setups are and not fall into that.
Right.
It's almost like we are living life and walking around different people through a landmine of sorts.
Yeah.
Because we are in the view of everybody all the time when we walk past.
Right.
Especially in crowded places. So
Right.
it's almost like it's not something that you can avoid, but the best thing you can do for yourself is to work on yourself so that it's clear what's happening around you and how do you not get sucked into those things.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so then with that, I think other than all these aspects, I think maybe where can coaches start at a more basic level, right? Beyond thinking, the first piece is really the emotional aspect. Like being able to sense into your own emotions and knowing where there are edges that stop you from sensing into the other person. Because like for instance, I can be looking at a Instagram post and like I see a drawing and some words, and somehow even though it's just something on social media,
And it's not related with your coaching session or what?
it's nothing related.
Yeah.
But when I see it, I see the intensity of emotions that's in that picture.
And how does it relate with me? Why am I feeling the way that I feel? That whole curiosity, introspection, without overthinking it, without trying to give it a meaning,
Yes.
but just following the flow, following the rhythm, following the feelings and whatever that comes with it. And I think that's what it means by following the dream, following the body's symptom. When our body starts hurting physically, are we paying attention to it, or are we ignoring it? Or are we saying that we have pain, let's take a Panadol to get rid of it? Because that's treating the symptom but not the root cause. What if that's a way of saying that our body is dreaming up? My shoulder right now is hurting. And if I were to feel into that, I'm feeling this whole level of fatigue that's coming up. And I just realized that I've been carrying other people's burden that's not mine. So why do I do that? Why do I keep doing that? I'm curious. Why do I keep carrying other people's burdens that are not mine? And if I were to feel into that and go into that whole auto state itself, I feel like I'm trying to make up for something, but I can't really see it. So maybe maybe there's an edge. Since we talk about edge, how do I work around with it? So let me shift my orientation now. Oh, now that when I shift here, I notice the pain actually intensify at the bottom of it. That's fascinating. How come when I move here, the pain shift into a different direction on my shoulders? And when I move, now I'm talking about that kind of subtlety and nuances. To be able to break down and categorize whatever is happening in my body every moment. Not just at the physical level, but also the emotions, the mental, the dreaming level, concurrently, all at the same time.
Correct. So I think in essence, we've moved from emotions then to body, right? In terms of what are the symptoms that come up, and sometimes there could be a visual tied to that body symptom.
Oh, always. Client starts talking about metaphors, and then in the middle of coaching session, started feeling pain. Of course, if they're not trained, they're going to say it's normal. But except it's not. It's a clue.
Yes.
It's a clue to the coaching issue itself. And I think that if we can train our clients and coaches in a particular way in the setup, then there will be more super awareness, super consciousness around all these details that's happening. And that might give us a new insight to how to maneuver the client itself.
Yes.
After all, this is the client's process.
Correct.
And we're co-creating and moving the process together with them.
And sometimes it's just a matter of inviting the client to tap into what's surfacing for
That's
them.
right. Just amplify it, let it unfold, Okay, they talk about metaphors. Okay, let's talk a little bit about metaphors. Tell me about the metaphor.
Yes, and you can even play with that metaphor that they came up with.
Right.
If their head feels like it's stuck in the clouds, you can always get them to move up where do they feel like going, up,
Right.
down, left, right, and what is it that they
That's right.
see.
Orientation, direction, right?
Correct.
Path.
That's
No.
directional coaching.
That's directional coaching, very important vector. Now, it's important for you not to interpret meaning because you're a coach. Plus, the client, just because you see a dragon doesn't mean it's a fixed meaning for everybody who sees the dragon. It's only related with the person's dream, the dreamer's dream. So it's important for you not to add in and insert your personal opinion when somebody is describing their dreaming to you. Guide them, help them move past it, help them move past the edges so that they can get closer to their true essence, so that they can get to their true nature and being aligned to who they truly are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're almost already responding to the how do you work with metaphors without interpreting it for the client. Sometimes it's about just checking in with them. What do they see this representing for them, or how are they feeling about this metaphor that's coming up?
Right. And of course, always important to have papers, tissue paper. If you're in a coffee shop, you can always draw things up because drawing engages the body movement. It also engages the feelings and getting them to really actualize the whole abstract, the ideas, the visuals that they see in the 2D format so that they can become one with it. So as they start opening up more their channels, we add more layers and layers and layers. The coaching become more sophisticated. It becomes like, hey, what is this whole dreamscape? Where am I going? What am I feeling? How is it related with the present problem that I wanted to work on? That's right, we're helping them to connect the dots.
Yes, correct. So somehow, seemingly, you don't have to talk about it. You can just go into that dream, and sometimes the solution presents itself, and you can then use that to apply back to the problem that the client came in with. So that's one way of connecting. So then when we talk about dreams and symbols, how do you stay in coaching when they bring up such material?
Dreams and symbols. Get them to draw it out. And get them to follow the symbols. I could apply movement channel into the dream symbol as having them to trace it and see what feelings that bring out. See how does that becomes the solution to some of the coaching original issue that they wanted to work on. Maybe in the process of doing that, they start making a certain sound. It's like amplify the sound, let it unfold. Whatever comes out, you just amplify it, let it unfold, let it unfold, let it unfold.
So I think it sounds like it's a lot around using the different mediums that show up.
That's right. So I think it's really about following the process itself rather than thinking that it's a destination. I need to get my client to point B, point C, point D. No, that's not your job. Your role is to facilitate, to coach them, to bring them, to guide them to follow the river, such that they arrive at the place where they need to arrive.
Yep.
So that's where you meet the criteria for the exploration.
Yes, and actually that really is the essence of MCC coaching. How do you flow with the essence of the client? And that when you're flowing with that, all these different aspects beyond the cognitive thinking will show up. You can play with them, and then that's where the answer comes very quickly, and that's where the client shifts in the moment.
Right. So I think at this point, we can use this opportunity to play one of the MCC recording for the student itself.
Right.
So here it comes. So pay attention to how fluid the coaching is and how it hits all the coaching criteria and agreements and requirements. Alright, now that you have here a atypical standard of how a MCC coaching looks like and sounds like, they're focusing on the client's dreaming, where are you at? What are you learning about it?
What are you seeing is possible in how you can deploy different mediums for coaching?
Right, and what are you experiencing it while following the recordings of being in this whole dreaming and fluidity state?
So take the next 15-20 minutes, to really review, reflect, and consolidate something for yourself.
That's right.
So that it's something that you can begin to bring into your coaching
That's
practice.
right. And silence is always a very important thing. Most of the times, when there's silence, people try to fill in the hole. Try to say something because it's awkward, but it's really your issue. Silence, being able to hold spaces, avoid state, is so powerful because that's the moment where they say miracles happen.
Indeed.
So don't be in a rush. If you feel a need to speak to fill up the spaces, pay attention and gonna ask yourself, where is this coming from? Am I really coming from for my client? Or am I really coming from my personal need because I can't deal with silence?
Indeed. I think we have encountered students who cannot stand silence. They have to say something to fill the void. Or in other cases, they end up over-explaining themselves.
Right.
Right. But if we look at silence, there's so much power in silence.
That's right. Pauses kind of invite us to go into deeper layers of awareness. Right. What information live in that is not said.
Correct. And when the clients get to sit with that silence and they introspect, actually the depth they go into and come up with is so much more powerful.
So sometimes people ask, right, how do we know that the silence is productive versus where the silence is overwhelming? Since it's silence, right? Both are silence. Simple take, you follow the energy. If suddenly there's a cutoff in energy, remember what we talked about in the previous episode, it's an edge.
Yep, correct.
They're just stopping because, that's their comfort zone. They will always stop at the same place. Now, our role is not to make them wrong, but to hold them gently, to get them to explore what is this really about in this moment? Why did this come up in this moment?
Yeah, I think my experience with silence is during one of my MCC recordings, I had a client who, after asking him the question, he would just sit with the question for the next 1 to 2 minutes.
Wow.
And so that was the degree of silence that was in the session.
That was really powerful. I can feel it.
Like kind of holding that, and that allowed him to really deep in, and that transformation happened just in that silence.
Right.
So don't underestimate silence, because
that's usually the spot where meditation transformation happens in the moment, or miracles happen. They say there's a spiritual saying, right? That's the moment where God meets us.
That's nice.
So that's why there's this thing called sitting in silence, right? Vipassana.
Yes.
Being with yourself, being with your body, just being with yourself. Why do we sleep in the dark in silence? Because it sharpens our senses up.
True. Maybe it's a lesson to learn in staying silent for a while.
Yeah.
I've ever assigned a coach this assignment of
so important.
Just be silent, don't respond to people, but just sit with and receive what's being put out there, so that it sharpens your senses in how you tune in.
That's right. And always pay attention in the middle of silence. Are you really present, or you went to some la la land?
Yes, the act of drifting is so common, especially when it's hard to hold attention.
People are always thinking about what's the next thing to do. They're never really there to connect, to be there. They're so disconnected themselves, and the funny thing is they're trying to coach people to be more connected. So we must really realize that we're going to do the work on ourselves. And I would like to ask you a question, your experience, what distinguishes connective coaching from mastery level coaching? I know just now you pointed out a few, but I would like to hear from your expertise.
So, to me, cognitive coaching is really ACC level coaching, right? Where you are just talking about what's obvious, and that the client can also see and hear, and you move forward with that. So, in such a case, there's little value to add. And most of the time, the coaching is focused on action plans, hitting goals, and so there's no depth to it. There's no deep core alignment to what the client is getting to. But for mastery level coaching, the key thing that is observed is the client shifts on the spot. Meaning a client can come in lack of confidence. They will talk in a way that sounds like they don't have confidence, right? So the symptom shows up on the spot. And then being able to help them to see that that's happening, and for them to then go into it and we work with them to find that way to shift it, so that they shift into confidence and perhaps even take action in that confidence to cement it. That is really something that can happen in a 1 hour session.
Right.
So that, I would say, is the expectation for mastery level coaching. How do they shift in that moment?
I see. That's beautiful.
Yes. So versus when you look at the ACC or PCC coaching, in the professional coaching level, you will begin to focus more on the whole person. So it goes beyond the goals and the superfluous stuff already. But then the person might not shift in that moment. They might still need to take actions after that to integrate and make it part of them. But then in the mastery level of coaching, the expectation is they have to shift in that moment, in that time. And the clients have to be able to be self-generating.
What do you mean by that?
Self-generating means that the space that you give to them or the questions you ask them allows them to go into themselves and find the answers they need without you necessarily having to ask a lot of questions that make them think. But then rather you are bringing them through an experiencing and having that presence or space that's given to them that is so spacious that they don't feel or see that you're there. They just go into it and it's almost like they are going through their own process. It's very natural. It's natural to the extent that they probably no longer see that there's a coach there. So it becomes so comfortable that they can then process what they need to, and the wisdom just comes.
Well, I believe they really heard it in the MCC recording earlier on.
Yes, correct. So what we're doing now is to explain how it is.
That's right.
Right, and that is one example, one way to play with metaphors that can bring so much feeling.
Yeah.
That allows a person to shift and then take a different path forward or take a different being forward.
Right.
That is the most powerful form of change.
Right. So how would you describe my approach?
Your approach in the coaching session?
Yeah.
I would say that what I love about the coaching is going into the imagery of the reeds and then the movement of it, and using that whole metaphor, play the whole thing out to the extent that the person can see what is possible. But yet you are not talking about what's happening in real life, those details. So that it becomes a very dreamy space that the person stays in, that allows that dream to unfold to a degree where when the resonance, when the alignment is there, then bringing that back to real life, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of a connection. It's a question of like, why do we even do dreaming in coaching in the first place? It's because that dreaming connects a person at a deep level that simple talk just doesn't. And when a person goes off track in their journey, it's very easy to bring them back into the dream because there's so much resonance with the dream. So I feel that that's what makes the coaching so powerful. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We hope you like this episode. Check out for next one.
Yes.
Thank you for watching.